Grief doesn't stay home when you go to work. In a recent study, 92% of grieving employees reported at least one health impact. Things like confusion, anxiety, sleep disruptions, panic attacks, memory loss, irritability, and other physical illnesses. And those impacts don't just affect attendance, they affect the quality and the focus of your work. Welcome to Spacious Corner Coaching. I'm Lisa Kelly, and I work with grieving employees and leaders who support them. Whether the loss is a loved one, a relationship, a job, a pet, your grief has a cost to it. And in today's conversation, Widows in the Workplace, I'm joined by someone who understands deeply. It's grief coach, educator, Judy Jackson. Judy became a widow at age 37 and walked the road for 17 years alone. And then she got remarried. She has dedicated her work to helping widowed women reinvent their lives so they can heal, feel hope again, and build something beautiful where they are. Judy, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Lisa. I'm so grateful for this conversation today.
You support women after widowhood, and I support people navigating grief in the workplace. So we share the same belief, grief and abundant light afterwards, and that they don't cancel each other out, really. People just need tools and the real support. So let's start with your story, Judy. Can you take us back to when your husband died and what that season looked like for you?
My husband got ill
Mhm.
and he was finally diagnosed with cancer of the kidney. And unfortunately, he passed away 6 weeks after his diagnosis.
Mm.
So it was a very unexpected, sudden death that impacted me at the core of my life. I was overwhelmed, saddened. I just felt stuck. I didn't have the tools and the resources that you and I share now to move my life in a direction of victory. So I struggled deeply.
Mm. There's just something really isolating about that kind of a transition, isn't there?
Extremely,
W-
extremely.
What would be one thing, I'm just curious, that you wish you would have known about grief prior to that?
I think one thing that I should have, I wish I had really known rather than avoiding the feeling of grief, I should have really embraced it and leaned into it because I did not do that. And
Mm.
if you don't grieve fully, you don't heal fully. So we're really not trying, what I learned is that I wasn't really trying to avoid the grief. I was really trying to avoid the pain. And grief is not just pain, Lisa.
Mm.
Grief is also love.
That's excellent, Judy. I've heard insight like that before too, but you've experienced it. And you've also experienced being a working widow. And so there's a real tension there. You're trying to hold it together, you're trying to hold a job, maintain bills and financial responsibilities. I remember a woman at my workplace, we were working remotely, and her husband had cancer. When you work remotely, you don't have that interaction with your supervisor, and everything's pretty generic. People don't know what's going on in your life. And I remember that she had to run back and forth during her work hours to take care of him. There is family medical leave of absence, but then you don't get paid for that. You're just allowed the time off. And of course, a lot of us had very limited vacation time. And so she tried to hold two things together, taking care of her husband and holding a job. And then putting on that perception that you are holding it together well. You don't want to appear incompetent at work. Needless to say, She was exhausted, and she really wasn't dealing with her grief because she was dealing with her husband's needs and her job needs. So there, the grief was put on hold, actually. So when widows return to work, Judy, what are some of the biggest challenges that you have heard about or that you have gone through yourself as a working widow?
You know, personally for me, and definitely in life in general, I really feel that your work, Lisa, is so profoundly needed. There is no policies to support healing at most companies, big companies. I worked for local government, which was a big not-for-profit company, and there are no policies to support healing. So you have to go on your own personal journey to try to figure it out. And there's so much stigma behind loss. And it's like the big white elephant in the room.
Mhm.
People's expectations for you are not real. They want you. I had 5 days to grieve, and then I had to be right back at work. So, like you just referenced, so I could get paid. And
Yeah.
so there I was, a person that had not healed, a person that was emotionally distraught, trying to put on a strong face and take care of the work that I was assigned. It was extraordinarily difficult and really felt isolated because a lot of people, even after 5 days after you buried your spouse or you've had a memorial service for them, they want you to move on with your life. And your normal, you have a new normal now. The normal that you had before is gone. So you don't have that capacity. So it's an extreme struggle.
Right. And you can understand the company's point of view too. They're in business to make money and stay afloat. So
Absolutely.
there would need to be some built-in expectation of that grief process. Now, I do know that employee assistance programs offer some sort of mental health counseling. I'm not quite sure about how long it takes. I've never used it before, but I have heard that there is a delay sometimes in receiving that type of help. So there was a study done recently, the grief tax report that I refer to often, and it did say that most people, I can't remember the percentage, but most people don't use the employee assistance program.
I
So,
personally utilize the employee assistance program, but utilizing that program, it was helpful to a certain extent. But like you said, the process of being able to get approved for the program, you're still grieving. So it took about another 90 days before that that I was even accepted into the EAP program.
that's what I heard. Yes.
That is, so then you still have a 90-day gap that you haven't had any tools or strategies
Wow.
or resources. You're still heavily feeling that way. So
Mm,
new policies have to be implemented.
what a need that is. And you had said a while ago, Judy, that you had to put on a strong front, paraphrasing you. I hear that all the time. Fear of performance, lack of, fear of perception, fear of being replaced, even. Many times in remote work, as I referred to a while ago, grieving workers don't tell their leadership anything about the loss because they don't want to fall into their manager's radar. We're that distant when we work remotely from our managers. There's also a legal and a logistical burden too. I saw a study recently, again, I think it was the grief tax report that said 68% of state executors are women. And it takes an average, I'm reading here, of 20 months to settle affairs. So, I mean, you're working two jobs and you got grief and paperwork. And again, like you said, all the while portraying that everything is fine. What advice, Judy, do you offer women who are returning to work and still grieving?
The first thing that I would offer is that to quiet your inner critic
Mm.
and begin to really somehow understand your grieving mind, what it does and why it does what it does. Also, to really stop self sabotaging yourself. Stop beating up on yourself because your new normal is so different from the woman how you used to show up at work. You're no longer that woman anymore.
No, no.
And the strained relationships, being able to successfully navigate through strained relationships because you get a lot of promises that people say that they're going to be there for you and they're no longer there.
That happens.
And really being gentle with yourself with all of the regret and pain that you're feeling.
So many widows describe grief in layers. There's emotional, there's physical, and there's social, like you just explained a while ago. Those people aren't there. What are some things widows often don't talk about?
The routines that you had with your husband,
Oh,
who's gonna go grocery shopping, who's picking up the kids, specifically this last quarter of the year that we're entering into now,
mm,
when Christmas, Thanksgiving, Halloween, all those important dates come up, your wedding anniversary,
mm,
his birthday, your birthday, all of that's different now.
that first year, right?
That first year is very difficult to make that kind of adjustment.
I hear this often. Widows want happiness, but they pretty much resist it. Can you speak to that, Judy?
Absolutely. I think widows, I know I struggled with it. First of all, I struggled with why did he die before me? Why am I still here? Really, what is my purpose? What is my mission? And then the whole betrayal of him, the whole betrayal of your love, the whole
Right.
betrayal of your marriage. You struggle with that.
You were so young, 37.
Absolutely.
How long had you been married? How many
We
years?
had been married 15 years.
When you and I talked at some point prior to this interview, you mentioned about your heart needing to expand. And I found that really profound. And can you describe that to the audience? They will find it profound too.
Okay. So if someday your heart finds new love, its capacity for love will just naturally expand. And your deceased spouse will still get all the love that you have now. And your new love will get the expanded capacity of your heart. Your heart will grow bigger
Yeah.
and your candle will burn brighter. And I'm definitely here to tell you, ladies, that's possible. I lived it.
That's great. And it gives our audience such great hope. Let's talk about tools and strategies here. Recent data shows that 75% of executors, like you were perhaps the executor of your husband's estate, have panic attacks, and nearly 90% of grieving employees anxiety. 92%, the data shows, report at least one physical or emotional health condition. And that's staggering. That's a huge percentage. In my coaching, I use the Pearls method, and it's a holistic approach, which means I look at the whole being, not just the mind. And we work on support and energy because we know how we lack energy during that time of grief, acknowledging the grief and past griefs also, lifestyle and support and service. And it creates a structure, let's say, of healing while you're still functioning in the workplace. Slow improvement, but definitely improvement. So that with that said, what are the tools, Judy, that you use in your coaching?
Well, with a widow, specifically, I don't know if she just lost her husband or he's been gone for 10 years. One of the things that widows suffer from is that inner critic. And so I help through tools and strategies I help an individual quiet that inner critic and really understand the grieving brain, how the grieving brain works, what it does, and why it does it. And then I work with the individual to stop self-sabotaging, stop feel like you betrayed your husband,
Mhm.
stop struggling with feeling that why did he go before I did? And then the people that are with you daily in your environment, your family, your neighbors, your coworkers, your
Mhm.
bosses, I help them navigate through a lot of strained relationships because you get a lot of promises when people die. People mean good. They want to say that I'm there for you. But after the funeral and everybody goes back to their common life, they're not there. And
Mhm.
then I help you navigate through those strained relationships with your expectations were that people were going to be there for you, and now they're not. And definitely helping a widow work through pain and regret so they can begin to have hope and passion and dream again, to be happy and believe that they can become happy and have a dynamic life again.
You mentioned a while ago, and it's such an interesting phenomenon and many emotional challenges. Can you elaborate on how self-sabotage relates to you or even some of your clients? How does it manifest itself?
Believing that you did something wrong, believing that you're not enough, those blocks that you feel that you want something desperately, you want this pain to go, you want to feel love again, you want to feel joy again, but you don't think it's available to you.
Mhm.
And the fear of being able to deal with society, that having the confidence and the courage to be able to again walk into any room and feel like you should be there, without struggling to avoid those kind of relationships and stay in isolation. A lot of widows isolate themselves.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about in the form of self-sabotage is the isolation. It has such a spiraling effect. You start in isolation, and Judy, you don't want to be isolated. That's the thing. That's not your desire to be isolated. So definitely coaching is needed, and there's such an overlap in grief support at home and grief support at work. Where do you see the connection with the two types of support?
I think that they're definitely interrelated, and I think that they're definitely connected because it's all a part of the grief journey.
Mhm.
You're helping the person be able to navigate to a place that was just normal for them and to come back and to be able to live a productive life where they can not only take care of themselves and their family. And then I'm helping the widow understand their pain at a very fundamental level.
Coaching gives us language, doesn't it? Sometimes
Absolutely.
we can't put that into words, what's going on in our hearts and our minds. And it's the gift that we actually give to our clients just to validate their pain. People who come to coaching don't always come for therapy, and we're not therapists, but they come for validation and a structure and a support and then accountability after that. So it's not just coaching isn't just a listening ear or advice. And I think that a lot of my initial calls come with the expectation that you're just going to get advice. When you go to my coaching and most coaches, yes, there's that spot for a listening ear and validation, but they have their homework to do. We look at their situation and we tailor it to their situation and we provide a structure for them. But the biggest thing about coaching is that accountability piece.
Absolutely.
How do you help widows find hope and redefine their lives? What does your coaching look like?
I really help widows really redefine their legacy because you became a widow and the legacy that you once thought that you had is now totally, totally different. So this is not only an opportunity for them to define the legacy of their partner, their deceased partner, but
Mhm.
also create and reinvent a new legacy for their life. So they can feel finally, sometimes in widowhood, you don't feel purposeful, you don't feel meaningful. So I help you create a new legacy for your life, that you're
Mhm.
reinventing your life so you feel purposeful, you feel meaningful, and you feel that you definitely have so much to give and offer. An
Mm.
expansion opportunity.
I'm thinking of Valerie right now. Why don't you share the
Exactly.
story?
So Valerie, one of my clients, was married for over 40 years and lost her husband unexpectedly one night. Now, Valerie has Parkinson's disease, and her husband was always her caretaker. He was the vibrant one. He played the saxophone. And she was struggling with her health. So you never would have thought in life that Valerie would still be here and her husband Michael would be gone. But
Mm.
Michael passed away unexpectedly. And there Valerie was, a woman in her early 70s trying to reinvent her life. Of course,
Mm.
all of the kids are grown. They're empty nesters, so being able to live alone was extremely difficult for her. But step by step, as we navigated through her emotional feelings, and I gave her some tools, resources, and strategies to help her change the belief system that even though this loss was so profound, that you can still have a healthy, happy life again. And so we worked on that for months. And I can passionately and happily say Valerie has wrote her second book. It's
Mm.
published on Amazon. She is speaking nationally to help other people that are struggling with Parkinson's disease. Her children have wrapped their arms around her, so she's traveling all over the world with them. And then she left such a beautiful legacy for her husband because the last book that she wrote was all about him. So not only did she define his legacy, but she was able to reinvent her life and define her new legacy as
Right.
well. She is very vibrant, very happy, and becoming even more healthier physically.
And just by leaning into that pain a little and maybe even moving out of her comfort zone
Exactly. It
just a
was it
little.
was a very deep struggle.
Grief is painful. We tend to want to cushion people who are going through such a trying time, and they do need comfort, but they also need that balance of challenge to the next step and leaning into the pain. I use that often in my coaching, and we have to use it very discerningly because of the sensitivity. But we don't want our clients to stay stagnant and stay stuck. It's not a marathon or the Olympics, I say, but it's a proven motivator when we use it discerningly with them. It motivates them to see what they can do. That was excellent description of Valerie's situation. And what does moving forward mean to you, Judy?
Moving forward means we're going to stop surviving. I tell my clients that all the time. Now we're not going to survive. I am going to support you in thriving, in
Mhm.
soaring, and in flourishing.
Surviving reminds me of the victim mentality,
Exactly. I'm
whereas
just making it. I'm just surviving. You're going to thrive, flourish, and
mhm,
soar.
there was a time initially for surviving and to try to keep that very brief so it's not prolonged. For listeners, what encouragement, let's say they're grieving, what encouragement would you have for them? They're grieving right here and now, and they're watching us.
That there is no timeline to grieve. So don't put a timeline on it. And rather than avoiding the pain, rather than avoiding the feeling of grief, we try to avoid it because it's painful. But grief is both pain and love. So to heal, you have to grieve fully to heal fully. That is so critical. And personally, I avoided that. But if you avoid it, it will still come back up. So
Mm.
don't avoid it. You know, don't avoid anything. Don't avoid the feelings.
Mm.
Face them head on, as you just referenced, lean into them. Embrace those feelings because those feelings are going to be the trajectory to help you change your life on a fundamental level.
That makes tears years after loss pretty much expected. And in your situation, like other women, you've had time to grieve prior to the loss because with a long-term illness or even a short-term acute illness that like your husband had kidney cancer, there's this anticipatory grief, right? And there's this time prior to the actual death that people have time to optimize themselves. That's what coaching does, helps with the anticipatory side. We help clear the clutter. We need to loosen up our calendar. We need to clear the clutter and temporarily get rid of those things that would hinder us because we really need to optimize our health. We need to optimize our time and give ourselves space and like a confidential space to process this would be in coaching.
I agree fully. Have to find a safe place.
If there's one thing you wish everybody knew about grief, everybody, not just the grievers, what would it be?
That grief is not only pain, grief is love. And that
Mm.
everybody that is breathing is going to have a grief experience on some level. So when you're faced with it, don't avoid it. Please
Right.
don't avoid. Don't avoid the feeling of pain because you're not really trying to avoid grief. You're just trying to avoid the pain.
Pain.
And you can't avoid that pain. You have to
Mhm.
face that pain and go through it so you can heal.
I've had clients actually wait until their job is in jeopardy before they sought help. I really wish more people would seek help prior to the loss because of that. And having a framework and a confidential guide and accountability makes the healing so much better and faster. Thank you for sharing your story and your honesty and your wisdom. Judy, how can people work with you?
My website, just please check it out. It's called yourcoachjudy.com. It'll pop up. You'll be able to contact me. And if you're interested in the services that I do offer, let's set up a call so we can discuss to see if it's even something that could really touch your heart.
I'm going to put your link in the show notes. I'll,
Thank
I'll
you
put
so
my link
much.
there too, but I'll put your link in the show notes and please contact Judy for questions and even validation. Just have a call with Judy. For those listening, with support, you can definitely become the boss of your loss. And we wish you well.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Judy.
Thank you, Lisa.